They followed me on the way to work. I tried to avoid taking the same route twice.
In a police unit, without camaraderie, you're at a total loss.
It's a storm. I was just a citizen like any citizen on Earth.
One of your closest friends is the one who wants to see you behind bars.
I felt really weird that somehow they had put me at risk without me knowing that I was in the middle of something dirty.
It's a witch hunt. They want to make an example of whistleblowers, show how they're condemned to financial and social death.
We are all part of a system. We seek security, recognition, and a sense of belonging in society. But what happens when we find ourselves on a course that no longer feels right, and we experience a crisis of conscience?
Another possible WikiLeaks wrinkle held on these disks. A former Swiss banker hands over documents to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Documents, he says, detail attempts by wealthy business leaders and lawmakers to evade tax payments. This data has been collected.
The prosecutor has all the information, but he's taken no action.
What I want to do is to hand this over to WikiLeaks.
After the documents were published on WikiLeaks, the case made headlines around the world. WikiLeaks gave me a certain amount of credibility. By contrast, in Switzerland, the papers were claiming I was mentally ill, that I wanted revenge, things like that. But WikiLeaks gave me some real credibility by publishing this information.
For more than a decade, Rudolf Elmer waged a running battle with the most secretive banking system in the world. Elmer worked as an auditor for the Swiss-based private bank Julius, first in Switzerland, then in the Cayman Islands, a well-known tax haven. It was there that he realized that he was heavily involved in wide-scale tax evasion and money laundering schemes.
I was a compliance officer, the company's legal conscience. And my analysis of financial data showed that some clients were engaged in criminal activity. The social damage that this caused didn't affect just a couple of people, but the whole of society. That includes my daughter's generation. And I thought it was important to show some courage and take a stand on this.
Elmer first went to company managers to voice his concerns, and there he was met with hostility. He was put under pressure and threatened. In the end, he was fired.
They said that if I took them to court, they'd ruin my life. And that was too much for me.
And that's when he found himself doing what he never thought he'd do. He broke the rules of banking propriety. He wrote to clients and published confidential company information. It was a counterattack against his former employer.
They hired private detectives to trail us. In fact, they stalked us. And that's when it became clear to me that the situation was getting dangerous.
The whole thing is that you put the finger on something that is huge, that's unfair, that's immoral, and everything goes against you.
Stéphanie Gibaud worked in the marketing department of the French subsidiary of the Swiss financial services company UBS. In 2008, she heard reports that UBS had been engaged in money laundering and helping clients to avoid paying taxes. Gibaud was shocked. Until then, she'd had complete faith in her employer.
It's a question of lie, a question of risk, a question of what I was guilty or not guilty of. Are you guilty of something if you belong to something that you don't know what the main purpose is, of the main goal is? I didn't know that the offshore business was the core business of the bank. My job at UBS was, I was responsible for marketing and communication, where most of my time was to organize VIP, top-notch events.
She organized events for some of the wealthiest people in France. But they were business opportunities, not social events. After the UBS allegations became public, management asked Gibaud to erase the data in her client base. Her employer put her under pressure, but she refused. It changed her view of her colleagues in the Swiss headquarters.
If I had heard when joining the bank that working with those people who were selling offshore products to French citizens on the French territory was illegal, I would never have done it. I would never have accepted to work for them. So it's a big lie, so I had to digest that.
Companies tend to have just one way of dealing with difficult employees: isolate them.
When you cannot go out, when your job is to be outside, when you cannot communicate with people and your job is communication, it's just a way to decapitate you. So days which were so busy and so interesting suddenly turned out to be boring. And I experienced loneliness and solitude, a situation where you just get mad. And when I left the bank, it's terrible, but I was not alive anymore. It took me, almost 2 years. And still now, I'm not 100%, because it's so much energy, proving all the time that what you tell is right, that what you did was the right thing.
Rudolf Elmer in Zurich. He was one of the first who dared to blow the whistle on the Swiss banks. It was like David versus Goliath. He realized that he had to go to the media if he wanted to make any headway against such a powerful adversary.
My case is one of several that the authorities decided not to investigate, mostly on political grounds. What would happen if you decided to prosecute big companies like Julius Baer or Credit Suisse or UBS? It would threaten the whole financial system.
All hell broke loose. The Swiss bank secrecy laws attract a lot of investors, and the banks earn billions, so the state will do whatever it takes to protect the system. The primary reason that people opened accounts in Switzerland was because of the bank secrecy laws. The anonymity of clients was protected by law. So when client lists were made public, it was like a bullet through the heart of the Swiss banking system.
In cases like this, you don't go after the bank. You go after the person who made the information public.
Die Wahrheit an die Öffentlichkeit bringt.
This is Swen Ennullat, a former police officer in the eastern German city of Dessau. He was deputy head of a unit that specialized in tracking right-wing extremists. He soon learned that his superiors didn't want the unit to dig too deeply into some right-wing crimes.
We put a lot of time and effort into our investigations. We went to skinhead concerts and right-wing rallies. It was called the monitoring program. But the closer we monitored these people, the more we saw. So the right-wing crime stats went up. And the politicians evidently didn't want to hear about it. They said, you don't have to go after everything. You can tone down your investigations a little. The right-wing crime numbers are too high. We need to keep the statistics level. So we were supposed to see that they dropped. But that meant no longer going to events like skinhead concerts and no longer investigating the crimes that were committed there. We were outraged.
The officers were commanded to turn a blind eye. Ennullat and two of his colleagues decided to put this down on paper in an office protocol. As a result, they were seen as troublemakers and shunned by many of their colleagues. Eventually, they were transferred out of the unit. They had broken a cardinal rule of German police work. They'd ignored the chain of command.
We loved our jobs. Then we found out what happens when the organization turns on you. They wanted us to feel as uncomfortable as possible so that we'd resign. They wanted us to suffer, to feel it financially, make sure our families suffer too. You're the cautionary tale.
I met many whistleblowers in my life, and none of the stories have had a happy end at the end. The stories which they have brought up were important, saving people's lives, saving millions, sometimes billions of euros or dollars. Everybody was tapping their shoulders, but at the end they all suffered. So I can easily understand that we don't have more whistleblowers, and I can easily understand that the whistleblowers we have don't trust any form of support.
Much of society considers whistleblowers to be heroes, but many prosecutors see them as criminals. At the Paris office of the European Commission, there's an award ceremony for the European Citizens Prize. It's given to people who reflect the principles of the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights. Stéphanie Gibaud is waiting for one of the winners, French whistleblower Antoine Deltour.
Salut Antoine. Comment vas-tu?
Très bien, merci.
Justement, t'en es où dans les procédures? Parce que...
j'ai la chance d'avoir qu'une procédure, donc pour le coup c'est à peu près clair et faut être patient en gros. Enfin, c'est le temps de la justice qui est assez long et il y a toutes les chances qu'ils décident de saisir du sujet, de la question et du coup d'annoncer une date d'un procès.
Antoine Deltour helped expose one of Europe's biggest tax cheating scandals, called LuxLeaks. While he was working as an auditor, he discovered how the government of Luxembourg helped multinational corporations avoid paying taxes. He was prosecuted by Luxembourg authorities and honored by the European Commission.
I am one of Antoine's supporters. I obviously am, and I will always be. He gets a prize, and at the same time, he can be sentenced for what he did. So he faces a potential 5 years in jail. We have no other choice than being extremely close to each other because we all put the finger on the truth. We are saying the truth. We are not the bad ones. We are not the liars. And Well, the fact that he just turned into a father, and I know that because I am a mother myself, shows the responsibility we have for the future generations. Why is information more important than people? Why are companies more important than people? Where is democracy? Why in Europe are we unable to find a sustainable law to protect people like us?
When this fictitious line of national interest is breached, then countries don't have any mercy. For that, only the activities of us working specialists in this area will not be enough. You know, it will have to be political action. It will have to be politically coordinated action, not only of one or two international organizations, but in more general terms, we will need to push to force the countries to recognize the importance of whistleblowing, also in the cases where this whistleblowing will harm their economic, political, whatever interests.
In many cases, whistleblowers have become public enemies. Switzerland has strict bank secrecy laws, and those who violate those laws are prosecuted.
I spent a total of 217 days in jail, first in 2005 and then in 2011. I was in solitary confinement the whole time. You're stuck in your cell for 23 hours a day. That was really hard on me. You find yourself wondering why you, as a whistleblower, were sent to jail. What I did in good faith, and I had legitimate reasons for doing it. I didn't ask for any money, even though I could have sold the information for $4 million. No problem. But I didn't want to do that. That would have put me back into the same system that I was trying to get out of. So I don't believe I deserve to go to jail.
What have politicians done about it? There's been plenty of debate and discussion. In Europe, the laws on the prosecution of whistleblowers differ from country to country. In Germany, for example, the federal government tends to leave things to the corporations involved. Britain has a law that is considered a model by many. And in France, politicians are debating whether whistleblowers should be protected by law.
Talks and talks and talks, so somehow it can raise a little bit of questions for people who have absolutely no idea of what whistleblowing is. We just have been fighting for 7 years in France for a law to pass. Where are we about that? All the people who were attending were whistleblowers. They all suffer. They all suffered critical situations, financial issues, medical issues, professional issues, family issues, whatever. We all suffer and struggle.
I'm not sure they actually heard real news, concrete news for their personal hopes, but they certainly heard that there is a text of the Council of Europe, so a European text, which is the basis for national legislations to address this issue, and gives directions to the national legislators as to how to address the issue of whistleblowers.
The decision to check into the clinic was a real low point for me. I came to realize that I was completely overwhelmed.
When people live and work within a particular system, sometimes they get to the point where they feel that they no longer fit in, so they decide to get out. And that puts them in a very isolated position. They feel alienated, and they begin to wonder whether they've done the right thing. They've opted out of a system that had been part of their identity. They've taken a moral stand against that system, and that can cause severe stress.
Swen Ennullat quit his secure position as a police officer. It's often tough for whistleblowers to find a new job, but Ennullat did manage. Still, things didn't turn out the way he expected.
I blew the whistle again. The consequences were just as bad as before, maybe worse, because I knew what was going to happen.
He took a job as a municipal administrator in a town near Berlin. He discovered financial irregularities at a local daycare center. Ennullat informed the mayor, who chose to ignore it for a long time. Yet again, it wasn't the alleged offenders who were fired, it was the person who blew the whistle.
This time I could have faced criminal charges if I hadn't spoken up. I was responsible for the draft invoices, so technically I could have been accused of breach of trust. We have a constitution in this country and a system of laws, and we should obey them. Otherwise, none of that is worth the paper it's printed on.
Swen Ennullat went to a labor court in Berlin to contest his dismissal. But there was an obstacle. It turns out he'd signed a document that said his contract could be terminated. He'd been under duress and not fully aware of what he was signing at the time. But the court ruled that his dismissal was justified. This often happens to whistleblowers, even though the European Court of Human Rights has strengthened their legal standing.
You can't go through this all by yourself. You make the decision yourself, but then you need support. You've also got to justify why you did what you did to your children. Would I rather tell them that I just went along with things even though I knew that they were wrong? Or do I want to stand up and say, no, this is wrong, and I'm going to speak out?
Meanwhile, in Switzerland, Rudolf Elmer's troubles continued. He kept appealing court decisions that went against him, and he had some success. Through it all, he tried to shield his daughter from what was happening.
Yeah, okay. I could never have imagined that all this would have such a negative effect on my daughter. If I had known, I wouldn't have done it. The impact on my family has been huge, and I feel really guilty about that. I really do.
Stéphanie Gibaud won 2 court cases against her former employers. Now she's keeping track of the French government's investigation of UBS for allegedly abetting tax evasion. She says her experience as a whistleblower has changed her life.
I'm a different citizen. This is very strange to say because I'm a mother, I'm a woman, I live in Paris, but this is what's visible. What's invisible is very complicated for people to understand. Even if I'm free to somehow travel or go wherever I want to, the prison I face is that I could not access another job after leaving the bank because my name was linked to the case.
Nor will Rudolf Elmer ever work at a bank again. Swen Ennullat has managed to find a new job. He now runs a local youth welfare office. None of their former employers were willing to discuss the cases on camera. Most whistleblowers don't do what they do for their own benefit. They do it for the benefit of society. They do it for the greater good.
I have no regrets. It all comes down to the moment you make a decision. After that, you're just swept along by what happens. It's like you're driven.
We all benefit from this financial and economic system. A lot of us simply don't want to know too much about what goes on behind the scenes.
As far as my family is concerned, I made the wrong decision. I should have done it anonymously. But that's not the right thing to do either, because you need people to take a stand, to put a face to the cause. Otherwise, it just won't work.
As long as the top managers do not go to jail, nothing will ever change. You know, the banks pay huge fines. And so what? The language of a bank is money. This is it.
I don't think that whistleblowers have had any impact on morality in the financial system. The system is much stronger than they are.
Trying to make all of you understand that you live in a big lie is worth it, whatever the price is.